Woo!
Boom. Back again.
We're back again at short notice.
Extremely short notice. Emergency podcast for all your listening needs.
All right, so today, what I want to talk about is what is the most minimal essential guide to spaced repetition for programming possible? Because my situation right now is that my sister, my darling sister, maybe I'll send this podcast to her, but she is now looking to do a transition from medicine into computer programming.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
It's awesome. It's really cool to see. Actually, it's really, this is a side note, but it's so funny to see that everyone who I know who does medicine wants to leave. For some reason, it just seems to push people out. But that's my question that I'll pose to you. What's the most minimal kind of guide that you'd need, do you think?
Well, are we just accepting the premise, which is that spaced repetition is the optimal way to learn software engineering?
Possibly. Yeah, we can get into that later, but yeah, let's assume that for now.
Okay. So if we're assuming that, by guide, you mean you don't know anything about spaced repetition and you want to start there, or what?
Yeah. She knows nothing about coding, nothing about spaced repetition.
Okay. I would look at that article. It had those drawings in it. I think it was by Nikki Case describing spaced repetition, and I think that would just give a primer on that. And then in terms of actually starting with making flashcards for programming, that's something I don't even know that I can answer it off the top of my head right at this moment. Do you have something to get us started? Because it's not actually something I have a ton of experience with. I haven't made a ton of programming flashcards.
Yeah, that was the thing. I think her goal is important in this, because I think her goal is just going to be how fast can I get enough programming knowledge that I can find a job.
Right. Well, if I could just comment just real quick on that. As a programmer, I would like to say that it's not that hard to do it. You know what I'm saying? You actually, if you're a smart person, and whatever, I'm not going to define what that means, but you'll know, or people around you will know.
No, sorry, my sister's retarded.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So just based on the genetics of intelligence, we can assume that she's extremely bright and basically everything will be fine, right? So the only variable is effort. And because she was in medicine before, she probably has, plenty of ability to work hard on things. So I just want to point out for anybody that's thinking about doing this, because I've seen this happen more and more. People are constantly talking about this, oh, I'm going to transition to software engineering. Now, who knows if that's a good idea? Probably it is, at least for the moment. But I just want people to know you can do it. It's totally plausible to me to start from nothing, learn how to code to such a degree that you can actually get a job within, I would say, 6 months, maybe 9 months, if you're really working hard, possibly even sooner than that.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. If you make it like your mission to do.
Right. And also, just completely brutalize ChatGPT or any AI programming tool you can get. You don't want to be looking around on Stack Overflow or Google or just try to find one-off answers to your problems. ChatGPT can explain conceptually why a particular solution works. So every time you run into a problem, it's an opportunity not only to solve that problem, but to deepen your conceptual understanding of everything related to solving that problem as a result of having an actual conversation about it. And you can do that with ChatGPT at any time. So highly recommend just completely abusing those tools. Pay the $20 a month and ask as many questions as you can at any time. I think that's such a huge key. Even right now, I learn new tools that way very often. I use it to help me solve problems in areas that I still don't know that much about. And that's a daily occurrence for me. So use those tools as much as you possibly can. It'll get way better than you think. You just have to learn how to use it.
Yeah, I completely agree. But the funny thing is, that I feel like that's changed the kind of ideal strategy a little bit, because I think now it's so unimportant, the syntax details of a language and specific, even specific concepts within the language that would have been important a year ago or so are just unimportant because ChatGPT will just provide this abstraction over it where you just provide natural language and it kind of just does it for you. And one specific concept I'm thinking of right there is like algorithms knowledge. I think it's probably still good to have some, but I mean, if ChatGPT can just write your functions for you, it's like I feel like it's less important to obsess over the specifics and the implementation details, and rather you should just focus on really like kind of high level conceptual stuff. That was kind of what I was thinking. So for example, I have like a draft of this guide that I want to send her, and
okay, perfect.
It's like 7 sections or something like that. It's like, and it starts with just what is data, what are variables, I think then functions, maybe like map and filter functions, because I feel like you use those a lot.
Plus, understanding those, that's actually quite deep conceptual now. Like just the transformation of something like that. It's so deep. It's so generalized.
Yeah, exactly. And then while and for loops, because I feel like that's all you really need to know there. And then no, wait, it was like if statements and for loops. I just tossed away while loops because I feel like you just didn't need them. And then
once you get one loop, you got them all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then async await, and that was basically it for the entire thing. I feel
like learning JavaScript,
or I guess Python or something. They have a similar thing, right?
Oh, does it? Okay, I haven't learned Python in a long time. Okay.
Oh yeah, I was assuming it did. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe I can just get rid of that section as well.
I'm sure it has similar things, but I just didn't know if it was the same terminology.
Yeah, but I felt like the amount you actually need to know now is so small. Like I feel like that's it.
Yeah.
That's literally it. And then the rest is just specific stuff that's going to be related to your project, like what libraries do you need to install. Obviously, there's some like you need to know pip install or whatever, but you can just Google that. That's obvious. I feel like the conceptual stuff is more important at this point.
Yeah, what I would, just to add on to that, so many of the cards I would make would even be beyond one of these base level ideas like conditionals, and just sort of questioning yourself about what type of solution you'd pull for in a given context, because ChatGPT can help, but very often it doesn't provide the optimum solution in your specific app, and so the more knowledge, basically the more awareness you have of the kind of broad toolkit available, the better chance you have of arriving at a best solution or a good solution on your own. So you think, oh, I can do it this way, that pops to your mind, and then you go to ChatGPT. Can you help me set up this thing in this way, right? So just being able to get that first step might be really helpful to you. Otherwise, you're left with asking, like, I'm building a web app, and how do I make a form? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like a really weird problem where you have to basically know what a form does, the idea of submitting to a URL or making a request to a URL, those kinds of things. Just basic fundamentals about how the browser works. That way you don't have to start from zero every time you're asking ChatGPT any question. But I don't think much of that would be like, what's the syntax for doing this? It would just be broad conceptual ideas about what a post request is and what a get request is and where you'd use one over the other and what's the significance of returning these requests in JSON or whatever, just basic stuff like that, and not, like complete this code snippet or whatever.
That's actually quite useful because I wasn't even going to put anything in about the web or JSON or anything. But
yeah, I'll obviously only do that if she's trying to learn web development, or if the listeners are trying to learn web development. Obviously focus on your specific things, but there'll just be concepts that come up over and over and over again, and you'll want to familiarize yourself with those so that you don't get stuck every time, at the same place every time.
Yeah. So one issue I was thinking of as well is like programming is an applied kind of discipline, right? Where 90% of your knowledge is actually gained just by building things. Depending on like how much time someone has to dedicate to this, because I think she's going to be actually in like working in a hospital while trying to learn to code.
Okay.
So if you only had, let's say, 1 or 2 hours a day to actually learn to code, do you think it's even worth it to do flashcards over spending those full 2 hours building projects?
Yeah, that's part of the reason why I asked the question at the beginning about whether we're accepting that premise. The way I would learn to code, and this is the way I did learn to code, and I still learn new tools this way, is I have something I'm trying to do, like a real thing I'm trying to build. And it doesn't have to be like a real thing in the sense that you're going to sell it or do it for a client. It's just some app you're trying to build, something you're trying to solve. And then you just work your way through because it's so practical. You know exactly the next step, which is I'm moving along this path towards this thing I'm trying to build. And this is my current blocker. So you know what questions to ask ChatGPT, you know what to Google for, you know what topics to learn about, because you're stuck on this very particular point. Like, oh, how do I add a button to the page? If you don't know, that's very basic, but if you don't know, then you don't know. So you go, oh, I want to have a button to click. So you go, how do I add a button to a page? Oh, here's the button. Bang, done.
Yeah.
So then you've solved that one problem. How do I make it so that when I click the button, I see it pop up? Oh, there you go. Like it's just like that all the way through to complex stuff, writing to a database, whatever else you want to do,
Yeah, that makes sense.
So to answer your question directly, if you only had that time, I would probably say make very few flashcards. Only make a flashcard when it's clear to you that some conceptual idea would be useful to remember, such that you can build your own understanding more readily. I think that's an important part of using flashcards for learning in general. Even if there's some more optimal way to learn that information, a big part of your ability to understand new things is the fact that you have an existing knowledge base within your own mind. And if you pay close attention to what it's like inside your head when you're learning a new topic, you'll notice that it's often building on conceptual ideas that are stored in your own mind. And so without those in your mind, you're going to have trouble building an understanding in the first place from which you can then build. So it's a tough thing. So I would say use them for that, to help you learn new things and improve your ability to learn things in the future. And then beyond that, just focus on building an actual project.
Yeah, that sounds excellent. Yeah, I'm gonna have to re-listen to this so I can actually add all of this stuff in.
Yeah, I hope I'm giving useful. I hadn't ever thought about it in that way, in the way you're describing it. But obviously, we both have quite a lot of experience. I mean, if I could just ask you, because I think this will be so useful for people. You went from languages to software engineering at really what was quite a rapid pace. And here's the weird thing for me, and this is part of why I'm saying programming is not that difficult at the base of it. I could tell even before you were a great programmer that you were going to be. I hope I even told you that, because you could just understand conceptually the ideas of it. And I'm just wondering, what was your process like? How did you do it?
Oh, well, thank you, my friend, firstly. And yeah, well, as part of this, I kind of want this to be a full guide for someone who is just in the situation that I was basically back in university, where it's like, okay, I'm studying something, and I'm basically feeling kind of fucked, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
With regards to the future and the uncertainty, and being like, how on earth am I going to have a career and stuff like that. So,
by the way, just so the audience knows, James was literally studying languages at university, not programming languages, spoken human languages.
Yeah. I was studying.
Was good at it too.
I was okay. I was all right. Yeah, I was studying Chinese, and so let's just go through the history.
Right?
I mean, yes, Chinese and German. I always omit German because I made so little progress in 3 years studying German that it's just not even worth mentioning. Dude, I like leave it off my
for
CV.
About 6 months.
Oh, did you? You probably know more than me.
You literally took it off? No way.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead. You were gonna give the whole tale.
Yeah. Okay, so let's rewind to my third year of university. I love studying Chinese, but I become very disillusioned with the course. I found it very stifling, because I was quite hardcore with the language learning. very similar to the nerds in the Anki subreddit who will just grind flashcards all day, like, create an immersion environment for themselves. That was definitely me. And I found like I was doing all the studying myself, and the course wasn't helping in any way, and it wasn't creating opportunities for me to go deeper. So, like, for example, from the first day or the first week or whatever that I got to China, I went to Shanghai to study for a year. I went to the administrators and I was like, okay, I don't want to do the normal language classes. I want to actually like go into some like Chinese lectures and just study like economics or something. Then I'd have an extra skill. Yeah, well, I mean, it sounded awesome to me, but I went to the administrators and they were just like, no, fuck off. Fuck off, kid.
Oh, they didn't give you any possibility?
No, there's literally no way.
Oh.
And yeah, that's the thing that really sucked about China. You were very kind of isolated from the Chinese students. Like, they had a separate dorm. You were kind of sequestered in an international student area. So I found that very frustrating. And over the course of the year, I was just like, yeah, fuck this. This sucks. So I decided, okay, yeah, I'll take a year out. Didn't have a plan at all. Was extremely stressed. And didn't really know where my life was going. But at the end of the third year, when I was still in China, my one saving grace was that I came across these wonderful learning articles by a wacky Polish man known as Piotr Wozniak. And I just devoured all those articles. And in one of them was the recommendation that, you should be doing free learning as opposed to having someone give you a curriculum and tell you what to do. So I was like, since I don't have anything better to do, I might as well do that. Because I literally had no plan but yeah, just nothing else to do. So I started off learning finance and economics. That went on for about a couple of months, and then eventually, I don't know how, but I wandered into programming, probably through a Wikipedia.
Did you have an existing interest in any of those things?
I did in finance and economics. Yeah, I started looking into that as a potential way to get out of language learning. But again, that's an industry that's difficult to, I guess not impossible, but difficult to break into if you don't have mathematics skills, if you don't have economic skills. If you, it's very.
And it wasn't as if you wanted to be an economist since you were a kid, or something.
No.
And same thing with programming. You didn't have any ever thought of doing that?
I'd used like Cheat Engine, and I'd played around with Visual Basic to do some basic hacking. But apart from that,
Cheat Engine, I remember that.
yeah, I completely failed to learn it before. Like, I couldn't have told you what a variable was or a function or anything like that. But,
oh wow, okay.
Because I had such an abundance of free time and nothing else to do, and I was using SuperMemo and flashcards, incremental reading, all of that stuff, I took to it really quickly. And it's really surprising like how fast I was able to go from not really understanding anything about programming to being at least decently competent, like being able to work on my own projects and stuff like that. And at that point, it was kind of like Neo in the Matrix, when it's like, he's starting to believe or whatever. Morpheus is like that. And I was like, oh, this spaced repetition shit, it actually works. It's really good. It just boosts you past that point that you have with any new skill where you're like, everything doesn't make sense and I can't retain even the most simple concepts like functions and variables.
Right, exactly.
I learn it like one week and then I forget
in that way. It's just like magic. You just go, bang, I'll remember that forever. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, if I could just ask a quick question on that. At what point did you start developing plugins for SMA? And I don't want to get lost in the esoteric here because most people probably won't even know what we're talking about. SuperMemo Assist, a really brilliant guy called Alexi, and it's built.
Brilliant, man.
It was basically anybody could build plugins. So James started building plugins for SuperMemo through that system. So I'm just wondering at what point that occurred and what role that played in making you believe that it was working, because you were able to build functional plugins, some of which I even used, like the time tracking plugin, stuff like that.
Oh yeah, a lot of them were shit, but
well, it doesn't really matter. They actually worked, and Anyway, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt.
Oh, for sure. No, it played a huge role because Alexi was like somewhat of a mentor in a sense, because he is literally if you were to think of the archetype of the 10x developer, that's Alexei. I mean, the technical knowledge required to create SMA is just off the charts, and the code quality
and
was really, really high.
I just wanna laud him even more. The guy, he is so brilliant. The way that he is, I don't know how he is that way. He's one of those people where, have you ever seen that movie Jason Bourne, and he's in the diner and he's explaining to the woman all the skills he has, and he's saying, I know that at this altitude I can run flat out for a half mile before my hands start shaking. And he's like one of these people where even if he hasn't been working out, he's still in shape and he could run a marathon or whatever. And that's what Alexei's like. Even if he hasn't been coding, you could like dump him into an ice bucket and then his brain would still be good enough and he could write code as good as anybody on earth. I mean, he's an amazing guy. Anyway, go ahead. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. No, that's completely true. And immediately I was able to do like mini tasks for him. So just very simple things like little tasks required to update something in SMA or add a small little feature or something like that. And so that was really useful, like being able to work on an open source project, because open source projects require lots of helpers and there's always like mini tasks that you can do. And also the code base is going to be enormous compared to whatever you can build yourself. And so I definitely recommend trying to do that if you're a beginner. But I remember, I don't know how many months it was in, but I do remember a point came at which people started referring to me as a developer. That I remember that being quite significant. Like, for example,
oh wow, okay,
yeah, like so people would say, someone would have a question about SMA, and then someone would reply to that person, "Why don't you ask one of the community devs or something like that?" And then they ping me or something like that. I'd be like,
that's awesome.
Oh, that's kind of cool. Yeah. Then it's like,
that
oh shit,
awesome.
I'm actually a dev. I started as just some random goober who didn't know shit, and now people are saying I'm a dev. And so
that's awesome,
I remember that being very significant. And then
for sure,
yeah, it was just more of the same from there, just building projects and yeah.
And do you think that you would have? By the way, I know you have to go in just a couple of minutes, so I want to give you just complete control. Just say
I've got like an extra 5. Yeah.
Okay, nice. Okay, I just want to ask: do you think if you removed SRS but you still did the project-based learning, I know it's a hard thing to assess. I'm just wondering about your intuitive sense of how much less progress you would have made.
I think in the beginning, it really made a big difference because probably I would have found everything too incoherent, at the beginning, because
too much new terminology.
Yeah, the bombardment of new concepts and new words that you just don't understand. It's just helpful to have those definitions cached in your head, so everything seems like it's familiar to you when you start reading later chapters in the book or whatever. To be honest, I think I almost think that incremental reading was more useful in a lot of ways in giving you this like broad overview of computer science and programming in general, because like just exploring those random Wikipedia articles, random books, like lots of like lectures and things like that, it gave me a lot of exposure to things like functional programming, like just the mathematics behind certain programming things. Yeah, just like stuff that isn't immediately practical or useful in the day-to-day job if you're doing like web development or something like that, but it just gives you that like deeper foundational knowledge. I feel like that's almost like what I should have started with if I was to go back in time. I think what I'd search for was the deeper conceptual side behind the very simple words like function and variable, if you know what I mean. So rather than just having the simple definition, you actually try to create a deeper understanding of functions, for example. So to take functions as a concrete example here, like you learn about functions and then you learn for example, about like computation more broadly and what that means, like what it means for something to be computable, what's the relationship between a function and a program, like let me think. Yeah, like there was something I learned today that I thought was quite profound. Like it was something by David Deutsch again, but it was to do with computation and like the provability of certain statements in mathematics. And he was saying something like, because computation depends, it's like a physical act in our universe. It requires physical movement of atoms. That means that what is computable depends on the laws of physics. So if we were in another universe with different laws of physics, we would be able to prove different mathematical statements. And I just thought that was a really interesting. It's not even useful. It's just like an interesting thing that just gives you that deeper knowledge, deeper. Like,
I think
kind
it
of
is useful in the sense that it gives you more of a feel, almost at like an intuitive level about what computability means.
Yeah.
So in that
like,
way,
it's
I do
than,
think it's probably useful.
Yeah, it's just deeper than what goes on in your computer. It's something more universal than that, in a sense.
Right. Literally universal like that. Yeah. Just to real quick, one last question, because I think it's so important. You mentioned if you can go back in time, you probably would have focused more on that. Can you think of another mistake you may have made where you go, I would have moved faster if I did that, or that was a blind alley, or whatever else? Just as advice for people based on your own experience, what do you think that you might have done wrong or could have done more efficiently?
Sure. I think if your goal is to get a job, and that is literally your one North Star kind of target, then you can do it a lot faster than I did. I think from start of coding to getting a job was maybe 2.5 years or 2 years. So I think you could half that by being more focused, or even more. I think Janka is she started maybe 8 months ago, and she's already doing interviews for jobs. So
yeah, she was an art historian. For people that don't know, she was an art historian. She was the girlfriend of a great friend of ours, and she's a great person. She's very bright, and she was an art historian, and she wanted to learn how to code, and she did it, and she stuck with it, and now she's getting jobs and stuff. So that's the model. And also, just as a psychological point, I bet a lot of people who try this will feel imposter syndrome, like, oh, I'm not as good of a programmer as somebody who went to school for this. And I just want to comment, that might be true in a certain sense, that you don't have the depth of understanding about computing and about the way that computers work in the same way that a person who has a computer science degree does. But people who go to school for computer science, they don't really know how to write code. Very often the curriculum is more focused on the conceptual ideas and not about how to practically write things. And I've talked to a lot of people who do have a degree in computer science, and they had to learn how to code on their own. So I just want to comment on that. You can be a great programmer without ever having gone to school. You don't have to feel like an imposter. Although probably if you do want to compete in that way and have that conceptual knowledge, you'll need to read textbooks and stuff, or that kind of knowledge.
Exactly.
Anyway, all right. Well, let's wrap it up. I think we should come back to this topic if people want to know more about it, because I think it could generalize. It doesn't have to just be about computer science. There's probably some general principles we could abstract.
Oh, definitely.
And say there's better ways to learn all kinds of subjects with the use of spatial repetition. So let's come back to it. Yeah. But for now, hopefully this is helpful to people.
Beautiful. See you next time.
Bye-bye.